Forget everything you think you know about reality, because your mind is collapsing 50,000 possibilities every single second, and you're not even aware it's happening. This isn't fancy spiritual talk or loose science. It's the hidden operating system behind your daily life. The same mechanism that lets quantum particles pop in and out of existence, all because someone decided to watch. The truth? Your attention is the most powerful force in your universe. And the problem is, nobody ever gave you the manual. Think back to the last time you felt stuck. The bills piling up, another broken relationship, the feeling that no matter how hard you try, everything repeats. Most people say you just need to think positive, take more action, or pray harder. But what if none of that addresses the real glitch in the matrix? What if your own act of observing, without even realizing, has been quietly choosing which version of reality lands in front of you? Out of infinite possible timelines, running side by side, you might have tried meditating, vision boards, gratitude journals. Maybe you've read the theories, quantum physics, law of attraction, frequency, Tesla, the whole list. Still, a nagging question remains. Why does it work for a few and leave most people feeling burned out, disappointed, even fooling themselves? Is it all just a beautiful illusion? Or is there a system working underneath it all, waiting for someone with enough awareness to take command? Right now, as you hear these words, your brain isn't just processing information, it's tuning the reality field itself. Neurons fire, the pineal gland decodes the electromagnetic soup. Your mind quietly chooses from the infinite multiverse which path you'll walk next. The scientist with the double-slit experiment wanted you to believe it's all randomness. But step back, look closer, and you'll sense something. Every outcome in your world is being filtered, collapsed by consciousness. Most people operate like unconscious observers, stacking patterns of frustration, loss, and limitation, simply because that's where their focus keeps returning. But if you can understand the actual mechanism, the observer effect itself, your life stops feeling random and starts aligning, sometimes with a speed and clarity that feels nearly supernatural. That heavy sense you carry? The doubt that all this spiritual science stuff is just a distraction from your real-world pain? You're not alone. You're exactly who this content is for. So, before we go any further, tap subscribe and turn on notifications. The algorithm will push you deeper down the rabbit hole, unlocking more transmissions that decode this hidden architecture of consciousness, manifestation, and quantum reality. And trust me, you'll want to see where this journey leads. Now, let's break the spell and rebuild the very foundation of how you experience reality. Here's something most people miss about why manifestation techniques keep failing. There's a measurable neurological difference between folks who can bend reality to their will and those who spend years trying without seeing jack squat. And no, it's not about worthiness, high vibes, or positive thinking. It's about how your brain processes quantum information through the pineal gland. The pineal gland isn't just pumping out melatonin to make you sleepy. It's functioning as a bioelectromagnetic antenna that decodes frequencies from the quantum field and translates them into neural impulses. When you understand how to calibrate this antenna consciously, you shift from being a passive spectator to becoming a co-creator of reality in ways that science is just starting to document. Let's start with the first major problem. why traditional manifestation techniques bomb out for most people. The mistake isn't in the technique itself, it's in understanding how consciousness operates at the quantum level. When you visualize something, your brain isn't just creating mental movies. It's generating electromagnetic wave patterns that interact directly with what Tesla called the universal mind, the information field that underlies everything. Tesla understood that all reality is vibration, but he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was describing literally how consciousness modulates the fundamental energy matrix of the universe. When you focus on something with emotional intensity, you're broadcasting a specific frequency that resonates with corresponding quantum probabilities. The problem: most people are transmitting unconsciously. Think of it like this. Your mind is a radio station that's broadcasting 24/7. The question is, what frequency are you transmitting? If you spend your day worrying about bills, your pineal antenna is tuned to the frequency of scarcity. If you're constantly replaying relationship drama, you're broadcasting on the conflict channel, and the quantum field responds exactly to what you're putting out there. Here's where the concept that'll completely reorganize your understanding comes in. The observer effect isn't just happening in quantum physics labs, it's operating in your life right now. While you're watching this video, every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every mental image you create is literally collapsing quantum possibilities into concrete experiences. The double-slit experiment proves that particles exist in all possible locations simultaneously until the moment of observation. When a scientist decides to look at the particle, it chooses a specific location. Your consciousness does exactly the same thing with your life experiences. Before you consciously observe a possibility, it exists in quantum superposition, all potential versions coexisting at once. The moment you focus intensely on one specific possibility, you force that quantum collapse into your timeline. The problem is, most people are collapsing the wrong possibilities because they don't realize they're observing. They think they're just worrying about problems when they're actually observing problems into reality. Carl Jung discovered something fundamental about this when he studied the collective unconscious. He realized there are archetypal patterns that influence how we perceive and create reality. These archetypes function like quantum filters in your consciousness. If you have a victim archetype active, you'll unconsciously observe situations where you're the victim. If you have an abundance archetype active, you'll naturally collapse abundant experiences. The key insight: you can reprogram these archetypes consciously. And when you do that, you don't just change your behavior. You literally change what kind of reality your consciousness is capable of observing into existence. But there's a deeper problem that needs to be solved first. Most people are trying to manifest from a state of separation. They believe there's a reality out there that they need to influence from in here. That's a fundamental misunderstanding that sabotages any attempt at conscious manifestation. The Hermetic principles that influenced both Tesla and Jung explain that as above, so below. Translated into quantum language, there's no separation between observer and observed. You're not trying to influence an external reality. You are the consciousness through which reality observes itself into existence. When you understand this deeply, not just intellectually, but cellularly, a fundamental shift happens in your ability to manifest. You stop trying to make something happen and start being the frequency at which that thing is already happening. You stop visualizing to get something and start observing from the state where you already have it. Let me explain what happens neurologically when you make this transition. Your brain has specific neural networks for different types of observation. When you observe from scarcity, you activate neural networks associated with survival mode. These networks are tuned to detect problems, limitations, and dangers. When you observe from abundance, you activate completely different neural networks that are tuned to detect opportunities, resources, and possibilities. Here's the crucial insight. These different neural networks literally observe different realities into experience. It's not that you change your attitude about the same reality. It's that you change which reality you're observing from the multiverse of available possibilities. The simulation hypothesis isn't science fiction. Serious physicists like David Deutsch argue that we live in a holographic universe where information is more fundamental than matter. From this perspective, physical reality is information, consciousness observing itself. You're not inside a simulation. You are part of the process through which the simulation manifests itself. When you understand that you're simultaneously the programmer, the program, and the user of this simulation, you gain access to reality codes that most people don't even dream exist. You can literally reprogram the parameters of your experience through conscious observation. But here comes the second major problem. Most people don't know how to observe consciously because they confuse observation with thinking. Thinking is mental activity. Observing is consciousness activity. When you think about something, you're processing information. When you observe something, you're collapsing possibility. The difference is subtle but crucial. Thinking happens in the brain. Observation happens through the brain, but it originates in pure consciousness. When you learn to observe from consciousness instead of from the brain, you gain access to capabilities that seem supernatural but are completely natural for consciousness operating at its full potential. Let me give you a practical example. When you think about having more money, your brain generates mental images of money, creates hypothetical scenarios, analyzes possibilities. But that's information processing, not reality creation. When you observe financial abundance, you shift into a consciousness state where abundance is already your natural reality. And from that state, you allow evidence of that abundance to appear in your experience. The difference between these two processes is like the difference between reading about a place and being in that place. When you read about Paris, you process information about Paris. When you're in Paris, you experience Paris directly. Conscious observation is like being in the state you want to manifest instead of thinking about it. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When you observe consciously, you're not just changing your internal experience. You're transmitting a specific electromagnetic frequency that influences the morphogenetic field around you. Other people feel this change even without consciously understanding what's happening. You've probably noticed this when you're in states of high coherence, when you feel centered, confident, at peace. People respond to you differently. Conversations flow better. Opportunities appear more easily. Situations resolve more harmoniously. That's not coincidence. It's your consciousness radiating a frequency that harmonizes the energy field around you. This capability amplifies exponentially when you understand how to direct your observation consciously. Instead of letting your attention wander randomly, you can focus your quantum spotlight on specific possibilities with laser precision. But there's a third problem we need to solve: unconscious resistance. Even when you understand conceptually how conscious observation works, there can be parts of your system that sabotage your efforts. This happens because quantum change challenges deeply embedded identity archetypes. Your life has been a collection of experiences that proved you have specific limitations. Your unconscious will resist any attempt to observe possibilities that contradict that evidence. Your ego interprets quantum change as an existential threat because it challenges the identity narrative it spent years constructing. The solution isn't to fight this resistance. It's to recognize that resistance is also consciousness, and therefore can also be observed consciously. When you observe your resistance with love and curiosity instead of judgment and frustration, it transforms from an obstacle into an ally. Think of it this way: your resistance is trying to protect aspects of yourself that feel vulnerable. When you honor that protective function while gently expanding the possibilities your consciousness is willing to consider, you create a bridge between your current state and your expanded potentials. This is the real alchemy of quantum transformation. You don't force changes, you create conditions for natural changes to emerge from the inherent wisdom of consciousness itself. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. What's the most important manifestation you've been trying to create without success? Drop a comment below, because your answer will reveal exactly what kind of unconscious observation has been sabotaging your results. Now let's get to the fourth essential element: understanding that manifestation isn't about getting things. It's about becoming the version of you that naturally experiences those things. When you focus on getting something, you reinforce the belief that you don't have it, which keeps you vibrating at the frequency of lack. When you focus on becoming the version of you that already has it, you shift to a completely different frequency. You stop trying to pull experiences toward you and start radiating the frequency that naturally attracts those experiences. The difference is like using brute force to move a heavy object versus using leverage that allows you to move the same object with minimal effort. When you understand the quantum principles of consciousness, you gain access to reality levers that tremendously amplify your ability to manifest. But here's the insight few people understand. The process of becoming isn't gradual, it's instantaneous. At the quantum level, there's no transition. There's only jumping. You're in one state or another. The only transition is the time it takes for your linear mind to process and accept the change that already happened quantically. When you really get this, you stop trying to manifest and simply choose. You choose to be the version of you that already lives the reality you want to experience. And in the moment of that quantum choice, you instantly become that version. The external manifestation is just physical reality reorganizing to reflect your new quantum identity. This is true quantum immortality. Not the immortality of the physical body, but the immortality of consciousness, recognizing its infinite capacity to choose and re-choose which version of itself it wants to experience moment after moment. Now we're getting to the most fascinating and challenging part: how to navigate through the parallel timelines that coexist simultaneously around your current experience. Because here's a fact that few people fully grasp. When you master conscious observation, You're not just changing your reality. You're literally jumping between different versions of reality that already exist. The multiverse isn't speculative theory, it's the operational structure of consciousness itself. Right this moment, there's a timeline where you've already solved every problem you're facing now. There's a temporal thread where you're already living the life you've always dreamed of. And there's a version where you stay stuck in the same patterns for the next 10 years. The question is, which of these timelines will you observe into your experience? When Neville Goddard talked about living in the end fulfilled, he wasn't suggesting imagination exercises. He was describing quantum technology for navigating between parallel realities. When you can consistently observe from the state where your desire is already fulfilled, you force a quantum leap to the timeline where that's true. But there's a specific problem that sabotages most people in this process. They try to jump to timelines that are incompatible with their current identity. It's like trying to tune into an FM radio frequency on a device that only receives AM. The equipment simply can't process the signal. Your identity functions as a quantum filter that determines which realities you can access. Deep down, you see yourself as someone who struggles financially. You'll unconsciously reject observations that could take you to abundant timelines. Your identity system will interpret abundance as an existential threat because it contradicts who you believe you are. The solution isn't to force a new identity. It's to gradually expand your capacity to observe possibilities that previously seemed impossible. Think of it this way. You don't jump directly from a very low frequency to a very high one. You make incremental leaps that allow your system to adjust and integrate each new reality before advancing to the next. Carl Jung called this the individuation process, the gradual development of the total personality through integrating unconscious contents. Translating into quantum language, it's the process of expanding your capacity to observe and integrate broader aspects of your potential that are available in different timelines. Here's where something counterintuitive comes in. Sometimes the most difficult experiences of your life were necessary to expand your quantum navigation capacity. Every challenge you faced broadened the spectrum of realities you can consciously access. Think about someone who's never experienced financial loss. They might have difficulty manifesting abundance because they haven't developed the capacity to observe through the necessary contrast. Someone who's been through financial hardship and then learned to observe consciously can access much deeper frequencies of abundance because they've developed a richer appreciation of the complete spectrum of possibilities. Your past experiences weren't accidents or punishments. They were quantum calibrations preparing your consciousness to navigate through a wider range of timelines. Now that you understand this, you can use those experiences as reference points instead of limitations. But here's where things get really interesting. The holographic universe means that all information about all possibilities is available at every point. Your pineal gland isn't just detecting future possibilities. It's accessing information that already exists about all the timelines you could potentially experience. When you have sudden intuitions about which path to take, that's not premonition, it's your consciousness accessing information about the probable consequences of different choices across different timelines. You're literally previewing results before making the decision. This explains why some decisions feel right immediately, even when they don't make logical sense. Your consciousness is perceiving that this specific choice will align you with a more favorable timeline, even though your intellect can't process all the factors involved. Now let me explain something about God that'll completely reorganize your spiritual understanding. The word God doesn't refer to a separate external entity governing the universe. It refers to the infinite consciousness of which you are an individualized expression. When the Hermetic principles say, as above, so below, they're describing the fractal nature of consciousness. You are simultaneously a drop in the ocean of consciousness and the entire ocean experiencing itself through the perspective of a drop. When you observe consciously, you're literally allowing infinite consciousness to experience itself through your individual perspective. This understanding completely dissolves the sense of separation that causes so much suffering. You're not trying to get something from a separate universe. You're allowing the universe to experience itself through you in the form of the experiences you desire. When you understand this deeply, manifestation becomes an act of love instead of an act of need. You're not trying to fill a void inside yourself. You're offering infinite consciousness more beautiful ways to experience itself through your individuality. This shift in perspective completely transforms how you approach conscious observation. Instead of observing with desperation or lack, you observe with curiosity and devotion. Instead of trying to force experiences to satisfy personal needs, you allow experiences to emerge as natural expressions of your divine nature. But there's another crucial aspect that needs to be integrated: the role of Stoicism in quantum navigation. The Stoic philosophers understood something fundamental about control and acceptance that's essential for effective conscious observation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He was describing precisely the distinction between what you can control, your observation, and what you can't control, how that observation manifests in physical reality. Quantum Stoicism involves observing your desired possibilities with total commitment while remaining completely detached from specific outcomes. You direct your attention with laser precision, but you allow infinite consciousness to determine exactly how that intention will manifest. This balance between intense focus and total detachment is what enables efficient quantum navigation. When you're attached to specific outcomes, you're trying to control how infinite consciousness will express itself through your experience. This creates electromagnetic resistance that interferes with the natural quantum collapse process. When you observe with total focus but complete detachment, you're creating ideal conditions for surprisingly better possibilities than your limited expectations to emerge. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you're observing financial abundance. Getting fixated specifically on winning the lottery, you're limiting how abundance can appear. But observing the state of abundance without attaching to the lottery as the only possibility, you allow infinite consciousness to manifest abundance through paths that might be far more interesting and sustainable than you ever imagined. Here's where we need to address a deeper aspect: simulation theory applied to conscious manifestation. Our reality is fundamentally informational, a type of conscious simulation. Then manifestation is literally reality reprogramming through changes in the informational code. Your thoughts, emotions, and observations are programming inputs that modify the parameters of the simulation you experience. When you consistently change the inputs through conscious observation, you force updates in the reality program. But here's the interesting thing: you're not just a user of the simulation. You're simultaneously programmer, program, and user. This means you have access to levels of control over your experience that go far beyond what most people imagine possible. When you understand that you're a co-creator of the Matrix, instead of a victim of it, you gain access to reality codes that allow fundamental modifications to your experience. You can literally hack your own reality through conscious observation. But there's a crucial difference between using these codes egotistically versus using them in alignment. When you try to manipulate reality to satisfy ego desires without considering the greater good, you create dissonance in the system that eventually results in uncomfortable corrections. When you use conscious observation aligned with your authentic nature and collective well-being, you're working with the natural flow of consciousness instead of against it. The results are more sustainable, more harmonious, and frequently exceed your original expectations. Let me ask you, which aspect of your life would you like to hack first using conscious observation? Drop a comment, because your answer will reveal exactly where you have the most potential for quantum growth right now. The final truth about spiritual awakening is that it's not a single event that happens and ends. It's a continuous process of remembering increasingly expanded aspects of your true nature. Every time you observe consciously, you're remembering a little more of who you really are. And who you really are is infinite consciousness experiencing itself through the specific perspective you represent. You are the universe looking through your eyes, feeling through your heart, creating through your observation. When you truly integrate this, conscious observation becomes your natural function, not a technique you practice. The reason traditional manifestation methods fail for most people isn't because they don't work. It's because they're being applied from a state of separation, trying to get something from out there. Instead of recognizing that you are the consciousness through which out there experiences itself. When you shift from trying to manifest things to allowing consciousness to experience more of its infinite potential through your unique perspective, manifestation becomes effortless. You stop pushing against reality and start dancing with it. You stop trying to change your life and start changing how consciousness experiences life through you. You stop seeking experiences and start being the space in which experiences can unfold naturally. This is the quantum field responding to authenticity rather than need. When you observe from genuine alignment with your essential nature, reality reorganizes itself to support that authenticity, because authenticity is consciousness recognizing itself. The isolation periods you've experienced weren't punishment or rejection. They were necessary quantum quarantine, protecting your developing observer capabilities from collective unconscious patterns that would have interfered with your learning to observe from coherence. The unusual synchronicities happening more frequently aren't random. They're evidence that your consciousness is becoming entangled with the fabric of reality in ways that allow direct communication between your awareness and the quantum field. The dreams where you're directing reality through observation aren't fantasy. They're training sessions for capabilities you're developing in waking consciousness. The ability to influence probability through the quality of your attention, you are becoming a bridge between current human limitation and expanded human potential. Every moment you exist in conscious observer mastery, you're demonstrating what humans are truly capable of when they operate from their essential nature instead of their conditioned identity. The next phase of human evolution isn't technological. It's consciousness, recognizing its creative power through observation. And you're not just witnessing this evolution, you're actively participating in it, helping to establish the templates that others will follow as collective consciousness awakens to its infinite potential.